thanks for coming along to our talk here. I think it's quite interesting actually when we did the schedule. I put this session side by side with Sandro's because I was really interested to see how many people are still interested in BizTalk and how many people are interested in saving money on their cloud bill. So I think he's still most of the audience, which is quite an interesting one. But thank you for joining us. And today we're going to talk about topic that's quite dear to my heart at the minute. Help my Azure bill just keeps getting bigger, which I think is something I've spoke to many customers about over the last sort of year or so. So I think many people might have met me yesterday. So I'm the product owner for Turbo 360, and we're going to talk about some of the things Turbo 360 helps with and some of the kind of the challenges and experiences customers are having. You know, I spent, if you imagine the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time speaking to loads of different customers about what the challenges they have in terms of day-to-day cost management, some of the cost savings that they've been missing out on. And we've saved customers quite a lot of money, so we want to share a little bit about that today. I guess the primer for today's talk is, Houston, we've got a problem. And you know, if you think about, I've never met a customer, I don't think, who's ever said, I love my Azure bill when I get it at the end of the month. You know, we have customers who are running at 100 miles an hour doing digital transformation, enabling users, building brilliant projects, but they're going so fast that nobody really thinks about the sustainability. So really it's, you know, it's 6 months after go live, 3 months after go live, we start seeing the impact of the project we've delivered, and we start thinking, oh, we wish we'd done this a bit different. And that really is, you know, what we're going to try and get into a little bit today. Now, a good example of this was that this graph's from one of the customers we've worked with, and they were delivering a lot of projects over a period of time. So you can see we start with data around early 2023 when they started moving to the cloud. And if you see the trajectory that their costs went at since they've adopted cloud, since they've been doing lots of concurrent projects, delivering things to the business all over the place. And, you know, effectively, they've pretty much doubled their costs during that time. Now, I'd love to know, is that what they expected when they started the project? Or, you know, it's a bit like you get the drug, you start taking it, and before long, you're doing more and more and more, delivering great projects. But, you know, my question would be, who was responsible for making sure that the project you worked on, or these many projects, was sustainable? And I think a lot of organizations, they would struggle to answer that question. And I think that's quite interesting. So we need to think about, you know, in this cost here, we typically see stats around 20 to 30% of waste in cloud projects. So if you think of that money that's doubled over a couple of years, there's probably a lot of that money's just been going down the drain. And we've got to think about, why is that happening? So why do we have a problem? And really it comes down to a few fundamental things that customers do. And to me, a lot of these are organizational challenges. So we have a lack of visibility of cost data. And even if we do have visibility, people see it, it's often out of date. It's changing all the time. It takes a lot of work to prepare the data to get it to the point of really looking at it. So I hear customers spend days and days prepping a data set, and then the minute they start looking at it, it's out of date, it's too big and too complicated to really do stuff with. Now, going beyond that, there's also a big disconnect between roles. So I often find the people who have access to the billing data aren't really involved in the solutions. So they don't know, you know, I've got these lines on my bill. Is that money that I've spent well, or is that money that I've wasted? I don't know, because I don't know the solution. But then the people who understand the solution have no visibility of the billing data, so they don't really know what they're spending. They don't really have visibility of savings, and they would be well placed to know if that money's spent well or not. But there's just this gap between these people, and that all results in missed cost-saving opportunities. There's fundamentals as a knock-on effect of that. So a lot of companies we speak to who have cost challenges, there's a lack of accountability in the company. Who is it who's responsible for making sure that money's spent well? And what we really want to do is help customers get to this point of having a cost-aware culture, so that we all know that we contribute to the Azure bill. we should be mindful of how we do that and make sure our contributions providing value that at least matches or exceeded the cost that we're having. Now, today we're talking about an integration conference. So let's spin this into an integration use case for a minute. So why is it that if we're building integration projects, why is cost difficult? You know, if we think back to BizTalk, for example, so these people doing BizTalk migrations, it was very much kind of very fixed price. You pay for an amount of servers, you've got a fairly fixed license. So while it might have been really expensive, the costs were very static and easy to manage. Now on the cloud, it's very different. So I've worked with customers that spend very, very little money and develop integration solutions that provide huge value. But then we also have the other extreme where you spend a lot of money on the cloud. And to me, the real problem here is about this fluctuation of costs. So a good little diagram we've got from one of our R&D efforts at the minute, I think it's this cost fluctuation projection here. So if you think about things like logic apps, function apps, a lot of these have consumption price options. That can mean the amount of cost is very influenced by the amount of load I'm processing, and it's difficult to estimate what that's going to look like. It's difficult to sort of keep on top of it. So that unpredictability really translates into risk. So how do we manage the risk on our costs? I think I've yet to meet a customer who's had a non-functional requirement around cost, which I think is quite a telling thing. We expect our website to respond within 0.5 of a second. That's a really common NFR, but it's not often you'll meet somebody who thinks we have to have this this project runs at less than X per month. I think that's one of the things that would very much change the mindset of people, because we've got a non-functional requirement. Now, if we think about in Azure integration, so some of the key cost drivers for the different services. So one of the good things, logic app consumption, for example, was quite challenging because it's all per execution based back when everybody was doing that as the only real logic app option. And that was very, very unpredictable, but could be very cheap as well. But logic app standard changed things a little bit because we have the app service model, so we can have that per second billing where we're paying a fixed price for having a node. But one of the things people often missed is, even though you've got that, you still have these consumption-based costs. So for example, storage costs, connector executions, these all varied based on the load. So there was still a lot of unpredictability in here. And I think if anybody is interested, actually, I've got some deep dive YouTube videos going through a lot of these things in real low-level detail about how they work for integrations. So feel free to check those out. But the key thing here is that we've got a lot of different things going on that affects the Azure integration cost. Now, at this point, before I talk a bit more about Turbo 360, I wanted to invite a friend of ours called James Reed up on stage. So James works for West Coast Cloud, who are one of our favorite partners at the minute for cost management. He's going to tell you guys a little bit about what we've been doing with West Coast that I think people would find really interesting. So please come up, James.
Good stuff.
Cheers, bud.
Just grab my notes. Great stuff. Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. As Michael said, my name's James. I'm the Azure Sales Manager at West Coast Cloud. A little bit about myself. I was previously in an MSP sort of technical background, and I transitioned over to sales with West Coast. I've been here about 5 years. Had a chance to do quite a bit of a lot of different things, but never anything like this. So it's my first time being in front of the podium. So a little bit about West Coast ourselves. We're one of the largest dedicated CSPs in the channel, and one of the oldest. My team alone manages 400 consuming partners that have thousands and thousands of end customers, and we're transacting about 4.5 million monthly in Azure consumed revenue. So we're very well established. We love Azure, we love cloud. We're primarily a Microsoft house, so that's what we love to do. So we're a value-add CSP, right? We want to build long-term relationships with our partners. And one of the conversations that was coming to mind was FinOps, cost control. There are tools that Microsoft offer, but they're not that great. And there are tools, I mean, we have reporting ourselves, but it's only limited to what it can do. So with that, we had a look out of the market, and we had a look at our customers. And what we were finding is that people treat their Azure bill like it's the gas bill, right? They wait for the end of the month, the bill turns up, they look at it, they go, oh, that's not too bad, right? Or, oh my God, that's huge. So we went out to market to find a proper FinOps tool, and we went through a lot of demos, and we finally settled on Turbo 360. Now with Turbo, we found that it really stood apart from the competition and the other tools that we demonstrated, purely down to its heavy integration with Azure and how much you can do with it. Now, I won't spoil the surprise totally, because I'm sure you'll learn a lot about it on the rest of this talk. But we've had a great deal of success with our existing customer base for ongoing cost management. But we've also had a lot of luck with using it as a prospecting tool. So what we're finding is we can give it out to our MSPs that have a potential opportunity, something that might be share shift from another CSP. And we can say, look, you can take this tool, you can run it on your customers, or potential customers' environment. It'll pull the data, it will pull you a report with all of the pertinent information you need. And what, sort of skipping to the end, what that allows you to do is you can go back into that boardroom when you've got your CFO and your CTO and all the big C-level staff that you're selling to, and rather than going, move to us, we'll save you money, which they've all heard 100 times before, right? What you can do is present to them, come to us, this is what will save you, this is exactly how we're going to do it. And we didn't find, as West Coast, that any other tool offered anything like that at all. So this prospecting sort of feature, as it were, alone, has already won business for our partners. Now, we've been working with Michael and Chris and the rest of Turbo for 6 weeks, give or take, a couple of months maybe, so it's quite new to us. Honestly, like myself and my two colleagues that are running this project, our diaries are rammed with Turbo events, basically. It's absolutely flying. So it's been a real game changer for us. And what we found is that having Turbo backing us, backing our partners, we couldn't really put a price on it, right? So ultimately, we didn't. Turbo 360 via West Coast Cloud partners, new and existing, is free of charge to use. So if that's something that you might be interested in, I'll be about the event for the rest of the day. I think I'm even on a podcast later. It's another new one for me. Come and find me if you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about Azure CSP in general, I'll be about. But yes, no. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of the presentation, enjoy the rest of the event, and yes, thank you, Michael.
Watch, mate. That's really good. Sorry about the slip there. Right. So thanks to James. I really wanted to kind of get him to share a little bit of what the team's been doing, because it's been such a good experience for us working with the West Coast team, because it's really proved kind of the ability for us to kind of scale, the number of customers West Coast bring to the table with extreme velocity, and just really empowering these customers to identify and kind of create savings really quickly. And for me, it's all about that feeling. We think a lot about the feeling of a customer who has an Azure bill. They feel just keeps getting bigger. They feel it's out of control. If we can change that, then they're going to reinvest more on Azure rather than feeling like they want to hold back. So one of the things we've done a lot of work this year on is this idea of zero to hero. So when we speak to various different customers of all different types, some of the things we sometimes hear is a customer wants to build a FinOps practice. And I've seen examples where the customer spends months trying to figure out how are we going to do FinOps. and they're like trying to figure out what's our org structure going to look like, and this, that, and the other. And the problem is they take months to do it, but they're hemorrhaging money during this time while they're trying to figure out how to do FinOps. And for me, what we want to do with Turbo 360 is go, it's almost like we do FinOps as a side effect of tackling this cost problem. And what we want to do is go from zero to hero. And also, I guess there's this dev FinOps kind of idea as well, where we want to get engineers involved and empower you to get visibility of your costs, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. And this here's kind of a really high level of my FinOps zero to hero journey. And I'm going to drop into Turbo 360 now and talk a little bit about how we do this. So here we've got the Turbo 360 home screen. I think a lot of people would have seen this yesterday. And we've got these 4 modules. And the one on the left is our cost analyzer module. So we'll just drop into this here. I'm going to show you our Covi costs for Azure. And we're going to look at the Document 360 team here. So Saravana mentioned yesterday about the original reason we built the cost analyzer was because of the challenge that we had managing the costs of Document 360 as it was scaling up. So he talked a lot about the growth in the number of customers, the amount of development, and Saravana really had those feelings of, I feel like my bill's out of control, I feel nobody's on top of it, I feel like I'm wasting money here. So what we do in Turbo 360, so the first step is we've got to set it up. So on our SaaS platform, for example, we've got a little video that goes through the setup process for Turbo 360. So really it takes about 10 minutes to get set up. We need, as a minimum, we need permissions to be able to read the resource configuration and read the billing data and read your reservations. We then start importing the data. And what we always say to a new customer is, right, we've connected to your Azure account. Let's leave it overnight and let it run. And then the next day, we start seeing some of these cost-saving opportunities and we start getting visibility. So that's quite big for James's customers, for example. So think of this prospecting thing he's talking about, where an MSP goes and talks to a customer and one day after them connecting Turbo 360, he's got all these opportunities he can talk to a customer about. Now, for the Document 360 team, if you imagine on this tree view on the left, I'm going to lay out my environment. So Covi as a whole, we've got multiple products that incur cost on Azure. And then we've also got some internal department costs as well. So we can break these up really nice on the tree. And then even for the Document 360 team, if you notice underneath that, because they're quite a complex team, the guys on the team said, can we have a node for each subscription, for example, so we can micromanage these? But what we really did in the team is we started off just at the team level and we holistically managed across 12 subscriptions in one shot. And then we just taking an iterative approach, we added the other stuff later on once we felt the team was in a better place. So in the product, from the tree view, we work across these tabs at the top here. So the first tab we usually look at is the analysis tab. And the idea here is how can I make it easy for somebody who just has a basic managerial Excel-like skill set to be able to look at where my money's going. So often for a lot of customers, what will happen is the team will, the manager will come to the developer and go, I need to report to my boss what the Azure bill is this month. Can you down tools from writing that brilliant application you're doing? And can you go and figure out how much I've spent? Which it's kind of crazy that the manager should just know. They should, it should be really easy. So we can create graphs here. We'll do a quick one. I like by service name, daily, as an area graph, and we'll do last month because there's not much data yet. So we'll just query that and we'll show that's how much I've spent last month by the different types of service. We can do things like we can click through on here. So if I want to dig into this a bit more, I can right click, choose another dimension, I can pop open new graphs, and I can really just start mining into these costs a little bit. Now, when we get started with Turbo 360, any node we create on the tree, we'd set the scope for the node. So we may look at tags or subscriptions or resource groups or really whatever you want it to look at. We can set security on the tree as well. So we've got some really big enterprise customers who have very stringent security models about different teams accessing different data, so we can lock this down if we need to. And I'll get 2 graphs out of the box on the tree. I'll have a bunch of saved graphs available that we add in the background, and then I can create my own, so I can just save this, pin it, so it's there by default when the team come in. And I create for the Document 360 team the graphs I really care about. Now, what I might do is, one of the features I like is I might want to compare side by side. So what we could do is we could say, right, let's have May versus April. Sorry, if you give me a second. So we could say May versus April, and I can get a flavour of how I've done 1 month versus the next, and I can kind of look for these patterns that are changing in spend. You can see Saravana's looking closely there because he's thinking, have we got any spend that the team aren't keeping an eye on? Hopefully that just comes across how intuitive and easy it is. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of customers, where you don't want to have a FinOps expert just to know where your money's going. You want to make this really easy so everybody can know. Now, one of the things that I personally really like is things like cost reviews. So a lot of customers I speak to, I'll say to them, well, when did you do your last cost review? And we often at an event, we might even have a survey about this, and we get things like, we've never done a cost review. We do them every 6 months. We do them when the management team shout about the bill being too big. And that really is a problem. That means that, to me, you've got a problem building up and you're not identifying it until you do these very infrequent reviews. And it's just too difficult to do them. Getting the data prepared to start a review takes too long. And what I want to do is I want to maximize the amount of time I spend in a review looking at the needle in the haystack. That's something I can do something about. So what I do with our team is we'll do this side-by-side table, looking, May versus April here. And at the minute I'm grouping by service name, so I can straight away see the services that have changed by the most for this team. So the Document 360 team may zone in on bandwidth and virtual machine are the 2 biggest one. And I would often change the group by to group by resource instead. And we may look for the top 2 or 3 resources each month and just really focus on them. And the idea is, instead of being a big bang every 6 months, we can just do a really small amount of work every few weeks or every month as a continuous improvement exercise, just keeping on top of things and doing good housekeeping. Now, if we go from the analysis to the monitoring section, so here we want to try and reduce our risk. Excuse me, just got booted there. There we go. So we want to reduce our risk, and there's 2 or 3 types of things we can do in reducing this risk. So the first one's the budget monitor at the top here. So one of the challenges with Azure budgets is they're very, a lot of things in Azure for me that make the cloud operating model difficult is everything's tied to the deployment model. So it becomes very subscription and resource group based. Whereas here, I want to manage my budget for the entire team. I don't want to have to worry about the intricacies of the lower level stuff. So at the top here, the group budget, I personally like daily budgets. A lot of customers might use weekly or monthly. We're not really keen on the Azure budgets where they're monthly, quarterly, and annual. We think that's too long a period. So for me, this is really simple. We've got the red lines, my threshold, the blue bars, my daily cost. If we hit the red line, we trigger an alert, and we've got a whole bunch of different capabilities for alerts. So the most common one would be drop an email to your help desk. We also have things like ServiceNow connectors, Teams messages, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's really drop your alerts into the workflow so you can manage cost alerts like any other defect, and we'll make that easy for you to help do that. Now, the next type of monitoring we've got is anomaly detection. So you can see on the bottom here, if I'm hovering my mouse over, we had an anomaly the other day. And what this is really doing, it's looking at the typical spend of your team in this case over a period of time, and we're looking for things where things are starting to go off the rails a bit. So this is more of an early warning than an explicit problem. So here I'm saying, you know, we've had a bit of a spike in storage costs, even though the overall team didn't change that much on that day. You might just want to keep an eye on this, and we'll get an alert to tell us to have a watch for that one. Now, another type of monitoring we've got, which I really like this one actually. I think this will be really cool for integration customers. So we've got this little tool called the budget planner on the menu here. So if you imagine my daily costs, my monthly costs are one thing, the actual cost I'm spending, but we always have people come to us and say, we need some kind of forecast, or we need some kind of estimate of what our costs are going to look like in the future. So what we do here is this little blue widget is, it's kind of like I'm not sure the right term for this, but it's trying to estimate the fluctuation in my cost in the future based on previous performance. So we're looking forward, and we can guess what range our costs are going to be in. We've got obviously like an upper and a lower band. And forecasting, that, you know, that's really great for forecasting, but one of the big problems, and especially as you all are doing Azure adoption, is you're going to be adding new projects and things are going to be changing as you go through this journey. So the forecast isn't going to know about the thing you've got in your project pipeline in 2 months' time that's going to drop an extra 10K on your Azure bill. So what we can do is we can do a little bit of configuration up at the top here, and I can list all of the different things I've got in my expectations. So I'm thinking, you know, think of a project manager who they can estimate project costs, and they can estimate people costs and materials, but now we can do this for cloud as well. So the red line is basically plotted based on my team telling it what we're expecting to do in the future. So I've got, you know, things like, in 2 months' time, we drop a new project, we expect this will be the impact on our cost. And this is what the red line plots here. So you can see how that's different from my historical forecast. And what we would be doing is in the monitoring, we'll be tracking the actual versus planned. And if we think that you're going to, you know, your current run rate means you're going to blow your planned cost, we'll give you an early warning to tell you might have a problem coming up. So we hope that, you know, that really is a good feature for things like project managers, delivery managers, operational team managers, to just manage your team overall. Now we do also have a few other quite cool features in this area. So things like weekly alerts telling you what you spent last week versus the week before is quite cool. And then I really like this little feature that if I highlight it here, so we just added this last month, and I have a lot of people who say to me, I need to get some info to present to my management team about how we're doing. And all of our graphs and all of our tables are all downloadable, which is really great. We can put, you know, you put together a PowerPoint or something like that. And we kind of thought, well, actually, why don't we just try and auto-generate a PowerPoint slide deck that you can just use? And so what I can do here is I can turn this on, and I can maybe once a month have it just generate a PowerPoint deck. You then download it. So I think I've got a couple down here. You can see this one here. That's where I just click and download it. And I might just pinch the slides, or I might use the deck as is. But it's really just trying to reduce the amount of time you have to spend, because, you know, at the end of the day, everybody really wants to be building new stuff. And this is just kind of the housekeeping that you really need to do. But you know, it's not really what you love doing. You know, you want to kind of build new stuff. Now, where customer, you know, if you think of the process we've gone through here, so we've gone through analysis, transparency, risk reduction, and now we're trying to save money and optimization. And this is where customers really like what we offer at Turbo 360. So, a few of the things that we have, so really number one, right sizing. So we added basic recommendations which come from Azure Advisor. We find that there's loads of customers just don't see these things in Advisor, that they're sat there for months, but they're kind of a bit hidden away. So we're creating visibility of that. But we also went further, and with Turbo 360, we have a bunch of custom recommendations. And these are our own algorithms looking at your usage, looking for ways to save money. So I've got my to-do list down here of all the different types of resources with changes we've identified. And what I can do, so if you take the first change here, so there's a couple of ways, sorry, let me take a step back from it. So the thing I want to really help you do that I think makes a big difference is go from a recommendation to an action. And I've heard lots of times over the years, customers get a list of recommendations, but nobody really does anything. And 6 months later, they'll get the list of the same recommendations. And it's difficult for the senior management to have visibility, to give accountability to the team to make sure we're doing them. So we can do a few things here. So number one, we've got this little link to jump out to the Azure portal if you want to go and check the resource. But you can also just click the resource here and I can see a bit of detail about what metrics are driving the recommendation. I can see the current plan and the target plan over here. Now, if I really like this recommendation and I want to get it done, if you give Turbo 360 permission, we can just click the apply button here and we'll go make the change straight away. And some of our customers really like that because they're just trying to get things done, but some customers prefer other options for getting things done, so we've got quite a few available. So the second option here would be on the actions menu, I can do a scheduled action. So where this is important is if, for example, a VM, if you do a resize, you have to reboot the VM, so we can't sometimes just do it straight away. So what I might do is queue up maybe a dozen VMs and say, right, let's go and make these changes on Saturday. So I could, pick Saturday morning here. We'll queue this up. The job will run in the background on Saturday morning and just resize everything for you, and then it's just done for you, and you can move on to the next task. The other things we can do. So on this menu, one of the options might be to ignore it. So I remember one of the customers we spoke to a couple of weeks ago was saying it drives them nuts that they get all these recommendations from their other solution they've got, and it's the same recommendation all the time, but they just don't want to use it, but they can't get rid of it. So we've got the option to ignore and defer. So you can say things like, ignore this recommendation forever because I might have an SLA and I know it's over provisioned, but I accept that, which is fine. Or you could say, ignore it for a couple of months because we've just gone live. We want to see how it beds in, and we'll come back to this later. Or the option that I think's the most popular one is trigger notification. So imagine I've got an existing workflow that I need to follow for how we make changes. So the scenario here might be I've got a change control process. So we could send an email maybe with a ServiceNow ticket or an email to your help desk system, log a ticket with the details of this VM change we want to make. Then we could assign the ticket, follow your normal change process, and then implement the change. And Turbo 360 will just pick that change up once it sees it's being made, and we redo the recommendations. Or another little personal favorite of mine is we've got a DevOps channel. So if anyone's seen me talk in previous years, you'll know I'm a big fan of Terraform and Bicep and stuff like that. So what you might do is go and create a work item in DevOps, allocate it to your developer who goes and modifies your Bicep script, does a pipeline deploy, and then Turbo 360 just sees that change come through and we'll mark that recommendation as done. Now, if we go beyond right sizing, we do have support for reservations here. So here we can see, the resources I've got in the Document 360 team that are picking up reservations and benefiting from them, which is really great. So often the team doesn't have good visibility of how the reservations we have impact their team. So we can see ones that are being well used here and ones where they're missing. And I think one of the things I really like as well is the team can actually see the details of reservations, which often these are hidden away in Azure where you need a completely different permission to be able to even see these. So here the team see them. You can see we use them quite a lot. We've got one that isn't used at the minute, so I think they're doing a little bit of moving around of stuff in the team, and we'll probably cancel that reservation, I'm thinking, quite soon. And I can click on one and I can see, you know, the things like the resources that have been picking up this reservation recently. And you can see some of the details of the reservation as well. And I think we've got quite a nice little feature around this expiry date. So customers, if you imagine you buy a reservation, often they'll not choose to auto-renew. So what will happen is, you know, you'll be paying a reduced rate because you've got the reservation, and then it'll expire and you didn't renew it. So your costs will go up again. So we can just monitor them, and when they come up to their expiry, we can send you an alert to kind of take that out. And I think actually a good little story while I think of it. One of the customers we were speaking to, they were starting a Turbo 360 trial, and the first thing they noticed the next day after they set it up was, oh, we're paying some money for this database and it's telling us that we should consider a reservation. And they said, oh, well, we've got a reservation for that, so why is that flagging that up? And they actually looked at it, and what somebody hadn't realized is they'd resized the database and they didn't have flexibility on the reservation. So about a year ago, they'd made this change. So for a year, they've paid for a reservation they haven't used, and they've also paid for a database at a higher rate because the reservation wasn't acting on it. And they just had no idea of that disconnect. But you know, they were able to basically correct that really quickly within you know, a couple of hours of starting with Turbo 360. Now, I think the last thing I'd really like to show you guys is the feature that I think customers find the coolest feature. We've got this scheduler. Now, I'm sure everybody delivering integration projects has got you know, a need for things like scaling down my environments in non-production when they're not used. It's a brilliant example. So it's quite painful to do that with a bunch of scripting. So I can have any node on this tree view can have multiple schedules, and basically I'll create a schedule. I'll pick a time window. So green means scale it up and turn it on. Red means scale it down and turn it off. We can do gray. So for example, if I do this, it means do nothing. So we'll scale it up at 9. If you scale it back down at 10 manually, we just leave it alone. And we can do monthly and recurring schedules. And basically you then go and pick some resources to add to it. So for example, here, I'll just query some of the ones we've got available. So you can see we've got about a dozen different resource types that we currently support. We do take feature requests from customers for other ones. And here I've got all my app service plans, and you can see we've got available all the tags and everything if you want to search by tags. And I can see that there's quite a few of these are reserved. So these aren't the best candidates to schedule because you've got like a reservation really means you're committing to consistent use of it. I've got one that's a bit further down which has not got a reservation on here. So that's maybe a good candidate. And what I could do, I could say, right, let's make you a P1 V2 during the day, and we could maybe make you a P0 V3 at night. So we use it during the day, and at night when everyone goes home, we just downgrade it, pay a lower rate overnight, and then inflate it back up in the morning. And the really big sort of use cases here are things like start, stop VM, scale up, scale down. I really like the SQL one, so we can increase the DTUs and the vCores and then shrink them back down at night. I think one of the things we've just released actually really good for integrate is we've got support for Logic App Standard plans. So we already had ESCs, but if you've got a WS star plan, we can make it a WS3 during the day and a WS1 at night. And that really, you know, that really empowers you to do these DevOps use cases, but without all the effort of writing all the scripting for it. You can just get this done and move on to building the integration. Okay, so that really walked through my zero to hero, and I think maybe the one last thing actually before I forget is we do have this little cost management playbook as well. That it's actually online. You're not required to have the product to have it, but here we've got loads of guidance and documentation about, you know, kind of as an architect, if I'm thinking about cost for these types of service, what things do I think about? And then there's loads of tips about how Turbo 360 plays into this. So we hope there's loads of good things people might find useful in that documentation. Okay, so I think to start wrapping up, my key question is, in your environment at home, who looks after your garden? So I often use the analogy of a gardener to help understand how to manage costs. So if I think I've got my lovely pretty garden, if nobody looks after it, it just goes really bad really quickly. So we need a gardener who'll go and trim the weeds, mow the lawn, water the grass. And Turbo 360 is really like your lawnmower. It's going to help you cut the grass. It's going to help you look after your garden. And the idea is to make the gardener's life really easy. I always remember once I was on holiday somewhere, and I remember this poor lady was cutting the grass with scissors at this hotel, which I found the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. But you really want the right tool for the right job, and hopefully Turbo 360 helps you with that. And some of these gardening activities, we've got get rid of unused resources, watch for unplanned cost creep, mitigate unexpected spend, and so on. And actually, I think one thing I might just really want to show everybody that I really just forgot here was this other recommendation bit. When we say, get rid of unused resources, this is running about 20 queries in the background at the minute, looking for things in your environment that you're not really using and we can maybe get rid of. So things like unmanaged disks. We had a customer came on board and within the first few days, they identified about $5,000 a month worth of disks that they weren't using, and they could just clean that up. Okay, so now that I've saved you a load of money, what are you going to do with it? Now, we're all here listening to AI, and we're listening to all these fantastic Azure integration investments. As a company, you're wanting to take advantage of AI and figure out how it can add value to the business. And my sort of hope would be that we can help you release funds in your existing Azure bill that aren't giving you value back. You can use that to help fund some of these AI investments and transition that waste into value, and that would be a really great outcome for that. And you can learn more about cost management. So my YouTube, Turbo 360's YouTube, and the cost management playbook. So that there's a couple of links there if anybody wants to grab them really quickly. Otherwise, the last thing is our community initiatives. We touch on these a couple of times. So we're recording a whole bunch of podcasts today and yesterday in the background. They'll all go out on Azure on air. And we also have a lot of stuff on FinOps on Azure, where you can just keep up to date with what's happening and kind of learn things. If anybody wants to appear on any of these podcasts, if you've got interesting things to share with people, reach out to us. And otherwise, I hope everybody has a really great rest of today, and thank you for listening to my session. Young, do we have time for questions if there's any, or?
Maybe one.
Does anybody have a question at all? Yeah. That was a question. Yeah.
So you showed that putting the threshold. So can we have multiple thresholds set up and then different actions on those thresholds?
So I think you might have been talking about this this budget bit here. Yeah. So there's a couple of really good options actually there. I really want you to be able to do it how you want to do it, but make it easy for you. So option number one would be on this node of the tree. I can do like a daily budget. You really just want one threshold, but if you chose a monthly budget, you can do sub-threshold. So you could do tell me when 50% of my budget's been spent, tell me when 75 and then 100. So that would be option one. And you can also create other nodes on the tree where you could do additional monitoring. And then we also have this little widget on the top right up here. That one's like a customized monitor where you can go and build your own monitoring a little bit. And we tend to find a lot of customers are covered just by the two main ones, but that's available if you want to like do a budget that just looks for a specific resource type. Maybe you say I want to do just my logic app costs. You could do a custom budget for that. I think you had a question there as well.
Sorry. What about, so a lot of what I look after are common capabilities. Now, the more successful they are, the more money they cost. And it's quite useful to redirect that cost back to the project or the platform that's consuming the resource. Is there anything for detecting who's actually consuming, connecting to an API that's then triggering a whole bunch of logic apps to kick off? And how do you then tie that through so we can allocate it to the right?
Yeah, it's a really great question. You're actually touching on our product roadmap a little bit there, because it's actually quite a hard problem to solve that one. So there's a couple of things how I would do it. So number one, on the tree view, when we've worked with customers who have that scenario, you might separate those costs out so you can easily see which costs are for specific integrations versus which costs are like shared resources. So I think I think it was not last year, maybe the year before, when I presented at Integrate, we talked about one of our customers who do kind of that scenario really well, where they create nodes on the tree for like different business units and different integrations and stuff. We do on the roadmap have some features about cost splitting. So I think your case, you're thinking about API management. I've got 100 shared APIs, who spends what? And I think the challenge there is, how do you work out who spends what? And that's one of the things we're working on at the minute. So if you guys have an interest, come and chat to us and we can talk about it. I think we're thinking about things like, if you work out which subscription consumes which requests, and then you can kind of split the cost up like that, is what we're thinking. But we really want to understand from customers like what the real application of that would be afterwards, so we know, how you would use that feature. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Cheers.